Hello and welcome to Between the Ropes TV. And this week we've got a very special guest. We've got Ray from Last Bell Boxing. How are you, Ray?
Evening, gents. Okay?
Yeah, all good.
Good,
Well,
mate.
today we've got Ray and Josh, who are both going to give us their top 5 pound for pound list in boxing. Probably a bit of bickering going to go on. I'm going to come to you first, Ray. If you give me 5 to 1, go through your list, tell us why. And as you can see, we haven't got Scott this week because we knew Wilder wasn't going to be in it and he can't cope with that. So for you, let's leave him out of it. He knows his place. So, Ray, who's number 5?
Yeah, for number 5, I've got Tyson Fury. He's finally defended the belt. He's the only heavyweight I know that moves like a middleweight currently, and he's now backed up his previous exploits in terms of the win against Klitschko. That really, for us, us Brits knew about Tyson Fury, his class, his ability. There was a little bit of lack of consistency, but I just think he's one of those that the better the opponent, the better he is. So those lapses you saw against Steve Cunningham and recently against Otto Varlin, he's a little bit like Billy Joe Saunders. If he's not motivated, you don't always get a top performance. But Deontay Wilder brought the best out of him, and you saw it in those trilogy fights. And I think he won all 3. So he has to come at number 5 for me. He really was the man that beat the man. And at heavyweight, I can't see anyone beating him. And so I have to put him in there. For number 4...
Oh, sorry, Ray. Sorry, I was just going to ask, actually. Obviously, there's talk of him having an extended break, and obviously with the whole Dylan White situation. So you back him to mop up the heavyweight division now?
I think you'll only have the one fight left at heavyweight, and then you'll walk away. I think he's holding out for the winner of Usyk Joshua, and that'll be him. He doesn't need to fight again. He's got the money. He's already got the reputation. He'd already beaten Klitschko and won all the belts there. If he does that for the second time, in his mind, he'll be walking around calling himself the second undisputed champ. I think that's...
Do you think he'll be able to avoid the winner of White and Wallin if that happens to get that fight against Usyk or AJ? Or do you reckon he's still going to have to? Because let's face it, WBC are acting like the winner's going to get the shot.
Yeah, but the WBC would be hypocritical of themselves for them to do that. How long was White waiting for that shot?
Yeah,
and now they're going to say the winner of White, Varlin's going to get that chance. I still think it's going to be Fury. I think we can all say they can't kid the fans, but I think they're going to be in a very difficult position legally for them to enforce Warlin to fight Joshua and the winner of Joshua and Usyk. I definitely think it'll be Fury, but I think whoever it'll be, whether Joshua wins the rematch or whether it's Usyk, Tyson Fury will win. I just don't see anybody because of his style, the best heavyweight. I'm not saying Wilder is the best heavyweight out there, but he's the only one that I believe that will give him significant trouble because of his knockout power that can end anyone. I just don't see anyone that can come close to him, give him any sort of trouble. So if he sort out all those legalities, which I think they will done, I think they've made that fight with Wilder, because you got to remember, Wilder was very close to accepting some step aside money, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So if he was going to take some step aside money, I'm pretty sure that the winner of that fight was going to go and fight for the undisputed title, which I believe is going to be next for the winner of Usyk Joshua and for Fury.
Right, fair enough. So number 4.
For me, 4, I've got to cut up for Errol Spence. He's a WBC and IBF champion. He's pretty much in all his fights. He's never really looked close to losing. He's big, he's strong, he's athletic, he's powerful. He can box. He can fight on the front foot. He can just about do it all. I think he's got the beating of Terence Crawford. But for me, for the position that he's in, I think for me, he comes in a comfortable 4th for me. I can see him. I can see him going through the weights as well. He's big enough to. I can see him making some noise at light middleweight. Although he may lose some of his physical advantages, I think he'll do very well there. I think he surprised a lot of people there. There are some physically big lads up there. You got Castano, Charlo, Jared Hurt's still there. But I think Spence is got the beating of some of those. For some reason, he hasn't moved up yet. I think he's got probably 2 more fights left at this weight, and then he does that, and then people see the real deal with Errol Spence.
Yeah, I think Spence is a top operator, and I think a lot of people was calling for him and Crawford, but I think it's all about the eye injury at the moment, isn't it? To see what happens from that, see how serious it really is, because I think after he pulled out a Pacquiao fight, I think he's got a few people worried. Yeah,
I think a lot of people were making all sorts of excuses, saying, "Oh, it's probably because of the car crash. It's probably like an after effect of that. It's probably because he's been struggling with the weight. It's probably because he's had difficulties in sparring." But for me, he proved after the Mikey Garcia fight, which was a tough fight to take after such a devastating, tragic incident with a car crash. But he handled himself really well in that fight. And then look at the Sean Porter fight. That was a tough fight. Sean Porter did have his moments, but I like the way he came through in that fight. I like the way he dictates the pace in those fights. And even if you're aggressive and put it on him, he still has an answer.
I think you hit the nail on the head with he's not looked close to losing. And certainly at welterweight, he's probably got the best resume, hasn't he? I mean, I'm a big fan of Crawford and what he's done, but at welterweight, Spencer's been there. And, going back to when he won the belt, I do think I'm a big Kell Brook fan historically, but he shouldn't have been at welterweight. But to go over to Bramall Lane and do what he did, he's an absolute class operator. And I think you bang on about going up to 154. I don't know how he still makes welterweight. He's huge for the weight, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He really is massive. His weight cuts must be horrible. But the other point that you made, which I've written down myself, is he goes to people's backyards. And when you talk about pound for pound, these are some of the top things that I look for. Everybody looks for something different in top for your pound for pound fighters. But I do like it when I see fighters that go to opponents' backyards and do a number on them. And that's why you've got to give all the props to Errol Spence. Kell Brook was the champion. Some say he was avoided. He went to his backyard, done a number on him. And if you look at his resume, like you were saying, guys, he's it's the best at 147 because he's taking a chance and he's taking those risks. He's got to people's backyard. So, yeah, he's a great fighter. He's a top fighter.
Right, and just carry on through the list. Who's number 3?
So, for number 3, I'm going to go for Terence Crawford. Yes, he's undisputed at 140. He's knocked out or stopped everybody's face at 147, albeit he's not exactly faced the top end of 147 fighters, but that might change, and I think it will change when he fights Sean Porter, who is one of the top boys at 147. I think he'll probably stop Sean Porter. It's a bold statement to make, but as Sean Porter keeps walking forward, there's very few fighters, apart from take Lomachenko aside, who are better at utilizing those angles. Crawford's got a real mix of skills, can box, he can fight front foot, back foot, orthodox southpaw. He's vulnerable, but that's what makes him exciting. And one of the reasons why I like Terence Crawford is he's done it through the weights, lightweight, light welterweight, and he's doing it at welterweight as well. And because I do believe he's going to become victorious in this fight, it just makes that mouth-watering fight with Spence even more appetizing. Although I would pick, the funny thing is, although I would pick Spence to win that fight, I've got to go with Crawford. The reason why I've got to go with Crawford is in terms of being higher on that pound for pound list, is because he's done it through the weights.
Yeah,
he's already become undisputed. He's evidenced it at lightweight, where Spence is kind of being at the one weight class. So I would definitely put him as number 3.
Yeah, I think for me with Crawford, I think out of all the fighters, he changes from orthodox to southpaw so effortlessly. The way he does it, for me, I don't think anyone does it better. I think I'd probably have him at the same point, I think. So,
So for
go on,
me,
Josh.
Crawford, sorry, Ben. For me, Crawford, the biggest issue he's got at the minute is his management. I mean, Bob Arrowman, it's been quite sort of well documented. He's sort of been slagged off for not being the biggest draw commercially. But how you can have, you've put it, I've got nothing to add, Ray. You've put it brilliantly. But how you can have such a talent on your books. And, I mean, what is he fought twice in the last 2 years? I think it works out to. And you look at those fights. Amir Khan passed his best. Big fan of him, obviously, as with Brits. Kell Brook, he shouldn't have been at welterweight 4 years ago when Errol Spence fought him. Really shouldn't have been at there, last November. I think he needs to. I mean, I think he's a free agent, isn't he? After this fight, and I hope he can link up with a promotion outfit. Whether it be Matchroom, on DAZN, and really let's do something with him, because otherwise, I think he as good as he is and as good as his record and resume is, I do worry it could end up being one of those, hardcore boxing fans in 5 years' time. We're thinking, oh, what if? Do you know what I mean? Like, the sky really is the limit for a talent like that.
Yeah. You done right with his promotional outfit. I've got a few questions to answer. What I would say is they finally delivered. They finally got the port to fight. The only thing I would say about Top Rank is, although I really rate Top Rank as a promotional outfit, I rate them highly than what I rate Eddie Hearn. They'll do what most promoters are doing nowadays and keep things in-house, which means they're probably looking at the Josh Taylor fight. I would have thought when Josh Taylor comes through with Catterall, that's not the fight that I want to see. I want to see him in with Spence, or I want to see him back in with a Keith Thurman, or, probably in with Ugas, and then going for Spence. But because those fights aren't happening, does he go with somebody else? And if he does, I probably like to go and cut him in with PBC, simply because that removes one obstacle from the Spence fight happening. I agree with you. He's if you compare him to somebody like Ryan Garcia, his persona and his personality in America isn't what it should be. It's not what it should be. But to his defense, you can say that with a lot of American fighters. I just think America now, although that's where the big fights are, the big fighters are no longer Americans now. And I just think it's a cultural shift there. And we're starting to see it come. Something that's starting to be European fighters, but I agree with you, Josh. I just think probably not the only one you can put in that boat.
Definitely, yeah. So, who have we got at number two?
Number two, bit of a surprise. I'm going to go for Inoue. So he's a current WBA and IBF bantamweight champion. He won the World Super Boxing Series tournament. He had a terrific real humdinger fight with Nonito Donaire in the final. But for me, it's who he's fought to get there. So for me, as I mentioned about going to your opponent's backyard is a factor for me for deciding who's going to be in my pound for pound. The other thing I like is resume, and although I mentioned going through the weights for Crawford, his resume at 147 isn't the best, but you can't have that argument for Inoue. Even when you go down to when he was at Superfly, his record's still outstanding. Look at his last 5 opponents. He's fought Jason Maloney, Nonito Donaire, Manny Rodriguez, our very own Jamie McDonnell, who was a world champion. He obliterated Jamie McDonnell, who was, very, very tough. And he fought Payano as well, and he sparked Payano out. So for me, it's the manner of his victories. He's not just beating people on points, getting unanimous decisions, majority decisions. He's knocking people's spark out, world champions. And that takes a special kind of fighter to do that. There's only 3 fighters I've gone the distance with Inoue. That tells me he can really bang. And I would put him and rank him as highly as Wilder for knockout power. The reason why I would say that is Wilder's knocked everyone out at heavyweight, and he hits ferociously hard. The bigger, the heavier opponents, but he is fighting a better caliber of opponents than what Wilder is. So for me, he's higher. So I've got Inoue number 2 for me.
Yeah, I think the power he's got is unbelievable. There's a reason he's called the monster. And I just think me and Josh had this discussion about him before, and I don't think he's going to be duplicated. I think there's only that weight for the power he's got, that free weight world champion and the power at those weights, you'll struggle to get another him. And I think that's what makes him so special.
Yeah.
Well, you got anything to add on that one, Josh?
I haven't. No, I mean, it will come onto my list in a minute, but I couldn't put it better myself, to be honest.
There we go. So, Ray, your number 1.
Yeah, me number 1 probably comes as no surprise, but it's got to be Saul Alvarez. This guy is phenomenal. 4 different weight classes where he's won a world title. The way I can see him getting beat is probably by if he's stepping up to cruiserweight, or if he fights Beterbiev or Bivol at light heavyweight. But anything under light heavyweight, I can't see him getting beat. And again, it's a manner of his wins. It's his full skill set. Also, he's a global star. And that for me is when you're talking about who's your pound for pound, it's got to be a global star. It's got to be somebody who brings in the casual fans, fills stadiums, and that for me is Canelo. As well as his skill set being superb, he's probably the best or second best defensive boxer that there is currently. I'd probably say for me he's the best defensive boxer. Offensively, he's magnificent. He doesn't have the quickest of feet. He doesn't have the greatest of punch output, but he makes up more than makes up for that. His timing's tremendous. His accuracy's out of this world. His shot selection's terrific. He wears opponents down. He takes out opponents' best attributes, and he just nullifies it. There's not many people other than Lomachenko that can do that. And he can really put it on people. So aside from Lomachenko and Fury, there's not many people that can do what Canelo Alvarez does and does it effectively as him. He's just, and again, his resume, people laugh at it and say, oh, well, he hasn't fought this person, he hasn't fought that person. But if you really go down and you really, really look at it, he is picking some of the best, not just for their rankings or for their belts, but for their height or for their speed, and he's beating them comfortably. Look at the way he's beaten our very own Billy Joe Saunders. He had the speed advantage over Alvarez. Smith had the height and the weight advantages. Even somebody like Danny Jacobs, who's got a lot of skill, again very, very quick. Lara, all these opponents that he's going through, and no doubt I believe he'll do the same at Plant against Caleb Plant, and he's just one fight away from being undisputed. So unless there's any other reasons, I can't see anyone for me that's got to be number 1.
Well, that's why we've had to not let Scott on this, because he'd be wearing his Bomb Squad t-shirt and he'd be just interrupting us every 25 seconds. Yeah. Right. Now, I mean, we'll get onto my list now, and I've got to say, when we asked you on, Ray, I did think, bloody hell, doing this with Ray, because you are one of the incredibly knowledgeable about boxing, so I wasn't happy putting my list up against yours, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I've got Fury coming in at number 5 as well. I've got nothing to add than what you said. The only thing I'd change slightly is that while I do think you're probably right, he'll only have 1, maybe 2 more fights, depending on the undisputed situation. I'd love to see him. I mean, before the Wilder trilogy, he talked to us about his 5-fight plan. And I actually would like to see that. And if he did it, which I said at the time it won't happen, it's him selling the fight, but it really would leave no questions unanswered. And he'd certainly be the best of this era. I think he probably is anyway, but you want to put the stamp on it. And I think he'd have to then be in the conversation of possibly the best ever at heavyweight. You're talking, he's obviously beat Wilder again. I agree with you all 3 times. If he then was to beat Dylan White, Joshua, Usyk, And I mean, Chisora, it's not such a thing, but I'd love to see it again. I just love Derek Chisora. But
I think the press conference would be the best.
It would, wouldn't it? So, but
Yeah.
I just think it would just put that stamp on it. So I'm agreeing with you there at number 5. Number 4. So I mean, we've got some similar names, but in different order. Number 4 is where I've got Inoue. Again, I agree with everything you said, and the reason that he's not for me is we talked about, and I agree with you on the commercial draw. And while I think he's a huge name to hardcore boxing fans, you know, if I always look at it, like if I'm sitting in the office at work and you start talking about boxing, they're more casual and they've not heard of him. And that's the one thing for me. I mean, you can't deny his achievements are incredible. And I do think now Top Rank have got the Sky Sports deal. I think he's obviously going to get that showcase in the UK. So I think
he's going to get that platform, isn't he?
Exactly. We'll be in 12 months' time. I do think we'll be talking about, you know, he'll be one of the most famous names in the sport if he can get the fights. But no, that sort of for me is at number 4. And I mean, you said it yourself, but I've got a note here. The Nonito Donaire fight was it was
incredible.
It was, for me, it was one of the best fights that I've sort of possibly ever seen, in fairness. So he's my number 4. Number 3, then I've got Errol Spence. Can't argue with anything you've said, obviously, with the whole Spence and Crawford. Me and Ben have this row regularly. He's much more Terence Crawford. But for me, we talk about welterweight and Spence, as we said when you were on him, he's been there, he's done it. And that, for me, that's why he's number 3 for me. I want to see him go up, and I think we'll get that. But obviously, just fingers crossed he comes back from the eye injury, because I can't even put into it. He's such a talent, you know. And like you say, he just never even looked close to getting beat, and he's been in with all the names. Moving up now to number 2. Now, this is where we slightly differ. I've got Alexander Usyk. For me, he's a 2-weight world champion now, obviously. He absolutely mopped up again at cruiserweight. He travelled. He's done the backyards thing.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
So for me, he's got to be in there. And I don't think he was an underdog as such against Joshua the other week. But I think, you know, if you had to put your house on it, a lot of people would have been backing Joshua to win with the size advantage. I was the same. I'm glad again we haven't got Scott on here, because he'd be fucking piping in there, wouldn't he? But no, for me, Usyk, you know, he's at his peak. I think we'll see the rematch, and I am still backing AJ to win it if he can. Obviously, there's lots to talk about his new training team that he'll be having, but he's got to be in there. He's mopped up, and he's just an absolute talent, isn't he? And then number 1, I can't argue with you. And I haven't really got anything to add. Canelo, number 1, as you said, 4-weight world champion. And that range from light middleweight up to light heavyweight, there's some really big size differences there. And one point I would add to is, obviously, you said he gets a bit of criticism, and you're right about who he's not fought. But when you look at who he has fought, Miguel Cotto, Golovkin, Callum Smith, Billy Joe, Kovalev slightly past it, but still, you know, you're not going too far back to he's one of the most fearsome punchers in the game. Danny Jacobs, who I'm a massive fan of. Amir Khan. And the Liam Smith win impressed me, because, you know, as we've seen even now to this day, it's the only time Liam Smith has been stopped. And again, you know, he was robbed against Kurbanov, but I don't think Smith gets the credit that he probably should get.
Smith took it to him as well.
Exactly. And for me, he probably doesn't get the credit that he deserves. He's so active. You know, I mean, he fought last December against Callum Smith in a big fight. Then he fights in February against Avni Yildirim, May against Billy Joe, and then obviously we've got him in a couple of weeks' time, haven't we, for the Undisputed? Yeah. But he's 31. I know he turned pro at 15, but to have had 59 professional fights, and, you know, the only loss is to Floyd Mayweather. And, you know, in reality, that fight was probably too early. But to avoid critics, I would just say, you know, for Canelo, it was probably too early, but much later, and Mayweather would have been past it. So I'm just glad we got to see the fight. But unless anyone's got anything to add, I think we're unanimous, aren't we? Canelo, pound for pound, number 1.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, you know, I think these pound for pound lists, that can all be changed. You can't really argue with how people see the top 5. But Canelo is definitely number 1. That's the only one that's irremovable for me, for both the points both of you said. But with the Mayweather loss, he learned from that loss. That's what's helped him. And I think Canelo's team, I don't think his team get enough praise. Like his game plan, like the Liam Smith fight, he was brilliant in that fight, but so was Smith. And then the Khan fight, Khan dominated, but you knew that Canelo was happy with that happening. And he waited, and he did the same against Kovalev. He knew Kovalev was going to tire like he did against Yarde, and he knew he could pick him off at the end. And I think he goes in with such good game plans. And like you said, he takes people's titles, he takes their unbeaten stature, and it's just, for me, he is the number one pound for pound. And like Ray's already said, he will beat Caleb Plant, I think.
Yeah, because he's a genius, really, in the sense that if you take someone like Lomachenko will box to his strengths. If you take somebody like Canelo realizes that perhaps his feet aren't as quick as some of the more elusive boxers. Perhaps he's not as tall as some of the boxers at the heavier weights that he's fought at. Perhaps he may not be as strong as powerful, i.e. is Golovkin and Kovalev. But what he will do is he nullifies his opponent's strengths. Now, not many boxers do that, and that's what makes him so good, because he almost gives them, like what you just said, especially what you just said there, Ben. He almost gives his opponent like a head start. He knows his certain opponents will be up in the scorecards, but he'll not be phased. He'll not panic. You know, he's very calm in an uncalm place, Canelo. Whether that's on the fighting on the inside or just basically being outboxed, because at times he can be outboxed. But that's what makes him so great. The fact that he comes back from adversity, you know, to stop his opponents. And it's when you're like, oh, someone's getting the better of him. Like, nah, because he goes and stops him, he goes and wins. And those two fights against Golovkin, I think, just personify that, really.
Yeah, I think that's where it started taking up more for him. Not every fight he has is a big fight. He doesn't seem to take the small fights. Like, I know people not the Yildirim fight, but it was a mandatory fight. He had to take it. And I think, but the one thing I love about him, he can have his feet still and his head movement, just that quick little move to one side, and he just makes his opponent look a bit stupid in that split second.
Yeah.
I just think to myself, for me, he's the best. But if you've got anything to add to this, any mentions of people who didn't make your list who you wish might soon, you wanted to?
I would give a shout out to Josh Taylor. You know, we are starting to see him get that recognition, undisputed at 140, and he's starting to hit these lists. For me, he was definitely number six, sorry. And you can probably argue he'd be in the top 5, but no, he's the only one for me.
Yeah, I've got a couple of honorary mentions. I've got Usyk in there. Josh Taylor, again, undisputed. You know, got to agree with Josh. Teo Lopez, you know, he's a great fighter, up and coming. I think he'll clean out at lightweight. Lomachenko, skill set alone, absolutely phenomenal. And Roman Gonzalez, Chocolatito.
Yeah, I love Chocolatito.
Best inside fighter, I think.
No, I can't argue with you there. And I think with Josh Taylor being on Sky now, that's going to help him, because he's fought overseas a lot, and I think this is really going to help his career. Yeah. So I think thank you all for watching. Please comment and let us know whose list you agree with. Let's see if we can see who gets bragging rights for next time. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and go on our channel for more videos. And thank you all for watching.
Cheers.
Cheers.